Hello, and welcome to Transformed. I'm your host, Josh McMullen, where we will discuss and explore topics and ideas on how to transform our current lives and be the person we need to be and the person God created us to be. So today I want to talk about repetition. Repetition is very important, right? In fact, it's the key to transformation is to constantly be adding reps and doing almost the same thing over and over again, right? Especially positive things. If you're wanting to transform positively, is to keep having those positive habits, to continually do those for a long period of time, to get that transformation, to put pressure on yourself to develop and grow, because transformation is a process, right? It's not something that's going to happen overnight. I know, like with the podcast cover art, right? It's got a cocoon and then the butterfly. That doesn't happen overnight for the butterfly. It takes a lot of pressure, a lot of grueling effort, and a lot of a long process for it to become a butterfly. And same thing for a lot of our process. It's not going to take bam, bad habits done overnight, or bam, I've lost a bunch of weight overnight. It's going to take at least several months to several years, or even the rest of our life before we're able to overcome bad habits, achieve transformation. It's going to be continual. So the key to success is by having successful repetitions. So what is repetition? One definition that I really liked is the recurrence of an action or an event. So this can be an actual action, right? Like an actual thing that you do. It can be a behavior that you try to repeat, an event, or even the way we think, or what we think about, or even spiritually, right? Like some of the repetitions that we do spiritually. And the more that we do these events, right? The more that we do these behaviors, these outcomes, the more we do it, it's going to be more natural. Like the more naturally it will occur to us. So that could be good or bad. For a long time, I had several bad habits that occurred very naturally. It seemed like, I would get into that mental rut very quickly, depending on the stress, anger, right, whatever. I would, get exhausted after a long day of work or a hard day of studying, go get the double cheeseburger, go get the Oreos, whatever it is, and have several bad habits to, disconnect and kind of escape from the world, right? And I think that's part of the reason why transformation took such a long time for me. And, it's still continual, right? I'm still growing and learning, but I think for the most part, the other part of transformation, the main part of overcoming a lot of these bad habits, took such a long time because there were so many of them and they were so deep embedded into my system. It's very natural, and it's very hard to break something that's very natural occurring to us. So to overcome that, right, we need that successful repetition. So repetition is key to success because it translates a skill or a habit from the conscious to the subconscious. So again, having it be natural. And that's why repetition is important, is because the more you do it, the more natural it's going to occur. So that's why, like, even sports teams, you're always practicing. And, if you played football, basketball, whatever sport you did, you constantly rehearse. I was in choir in high school, right? And we would just sing the same song, or, the songs that we were going to perform, we'd sing them over and over and over again. That way, you knew once it came time to actually perform, it was pretty natural. You knew, the entire song categories that you're going to sing. Same, if you people in the youth group, they do dance, right? You're going to practice those moves over and over and over again. That way, by the time you actually get to your actual rehearsal or your performance, you already know everything that you're going to do. And you're going to be comfortable with it because, again, it's almost that second nature habit and mindset. So I know even my dad, he said in high school, they wanted to run a play for football so well that the other team could know that play is coming and that fullback is going to hit that hole and that running back is going to go there. But even if they were told what play it's going to be, that they wanted to run it so well and so perfectly and it was so much second nature to them that they would still have a positive gain, right? Like, they would get 4 or 5 yards out of that play, even if they knew the defense knew what the role was. So, things becoming second nature, right? You just repetition to making it second nature. A lot of that, we can kind of get down a fun rabbit hole here. It has to deal with like neural pathways that are formed. this is a very basic overview, and I might have mentioned it a couple other times in other podcasts, but really it's how habits are formed, and this is, again, a very generic version of it, but it is something that's a fun read about how we form habits. So when we do something, right, like a new skill or a habit, right, it actually forms like deep grooves in our brains, like an actual rut, like an actual neural pathway, and the more we do something, the stronger that pathway gets. So, which is also makes it easier and easier for that thing to do, right? So whether it's performing a dance or running or losing weight, right, the better you get with that groove, the stronger that groove gets, and, the easier that habit is to be formed and easier that task is to do. Again, like I said, with some bad habits, the easier those bad habits are to fall into because we've built that groove in our mind to easily fall into that. So that's why breaking old habits is hard, right? And it's hard to start new habits is because it takes a long time for those grooves and to get kind of developed into our own mind. So can't teach an old dog new tricks is hard. Breaking habits is hard is because, one, you're having to reframe new grooves, right? So, for example, like I struggled, a long time with pornography. So I had to undo that groove, right? I had to get out of that mindset and get out of that groove, but also form new habits that counteracted, so instead of, watching porn, right, then I would have to develop new habits around whatever was getting me into that, right? So instead of, even like look at food, that's probably more relevant or even easier one to talk about is dieting, right? Like, so instead of getting stressed and going to eat Oreos, so instead of getting stressed, I would go and go on a run, or instead of Oreos, maybe substitute that with something that's healthier. So substituting something with healthier and replacing that habit with a positive habit. So that's big, and that's like, again, that develops their neural pathway. It means that change is hard, right? Transformation is hard. It's going to take a lot of pressure, going to take a lot of time, which is why I said it's not going to be overnight, because you're going to have to develop the new habit and sometimes even break the old. So that's why we got to practice. We got to keep doing the repetitions. You got to keep doing it over and over again. Yes, the change is hard, but it's not impossible. Change is just hard. But the practice, the more you do it, it's going to continue to build that neural pathway, and you're going to be better at it. And eventually your new habit's going to be second nature, and you're going to overcome those bad habits with time, with pressure, and with continual repetition. So some masters of repetition that you kind of hear about, some of them I got from other books that I've either discussed or talked about, but one that I really liked was Tim Tebow. Reading some of his books, he talked about how, he would try to swing or throw 10,000 times just to get a habit, get the right motion formed, right? And he would get comfortable and make it more natural throwing a baseball or swinging a bat. And he would note that it took like 10,000 reps. And not just like, I think it wasn't just like 10,000 reps, right? But he had to be like actually 10,000 good reps, which is why I really wanted to note this is, you really want to have it to be successful repetition. That's why I try to really note that successful repetition. You don't want to have just something that's a bad habit or something that is a subpar habit or a subpar way of doing something, because that's not really a good habit that you want to build. You want to have it to be a successful repetition. That way hey, this was a good event. This is what I'm going to get out of it. And so, yeah, successful repetitions, because, for a throwing habit, right, if you get the wrong motion down or you throw it poorly one time, it's going to kind of reset and make it, you might even fall into even a worse habit, whether it's throwing, running, dieting, whatever it is you're trying to do. You want to have successful reps at it. The other master of repetition that Mark Batterson talks about a lot in his books is George Shotgun Shuba, who played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. That he would swing his bat like 600 times a day throughout the offseason. Again, that way he knew it was second nature. He would swing it so many times that swinging a bat was it was a fluid motion. It looked like an extension of his arms. And he would just keep regardless of what he would do. He wouldn't go to bed until he swung the bat 600 times. Michael Jordan, you hear about Michael Jordan where, he wouldn't go to bed, or even Kobe Bryant. Like, they wouldn't go to bed until they hit so many free throws. And they were just these masters of repetition, because they knew the more you practice, the more you got into it, the more perfect your swing is going to be, the more perfect your motion is going to be, the more perfect habit's going to be. That way, when you're in the game, when you're needing to perform those skills, it's already second nature. That once it comes, look at it for like the pornography thing. So let's say you've built up a foundation of, all right, I'm going to read my Bible, I'm going to pray, I'm going to have that, the helmet of salvation and the body, the armor of God on, right? And I'm going to do all these things, and you're going to keep practicing, basically, lack of a better word, being abstinent from the pornography and trying to resist that temptation. Once that temptation hits, the more you practice, the more you swing, it's going to be more second nature to resist that temptation. You just try it. You got to resist temptation one time, right? And that's going to start the groove. And you got to resist temptation again and again and again to build the groove of resisting the temptation, right? And then eventually the groove of watching pornography is going to get less and less, right? Because that habit is going away slowly. So you just got to have that temptation, resist the temptation one time, flee from the temptation one time, and continually do that, rep by rep, and eventually it's going to be second nature. And that's not really going to be a habit for you. Next thing you know, you got to focus on the other bad habit that you have. For me, it's like, okay, wow, now I got to focus on food. Okay, now I got to focus on anger and porn and whatever else, things that I've got to work on. I'm sure Shiloh can probably joke and tell you, or not joke, but probably can tell you other things I got to work on. And again, it's a constant thing that you got to keep improving on things. But you just got to try, right? You got to keep doing that rep, and eventually that improvement becomes second nature. So, again, kind of with my example of porn, that really helped me with a lot of things, right? If the more I got with God, the more I got into reading the Bible, the more I got into prayer, the more I got into developing as the person God wanted me to be, and listening to sermons and audiobooks, and really devoting a lot more of my time to God, and not just the cliche Sundays and maybe one little devotion, right? Maybe I just kept continually adding those positive habits of reading God's Word and getting into other studies, and really focusing my attention on my relationship with Christ. And when I did that, it strengthened that groove, and I felt like I was able to overcome pornography a lot more. I was able to overcome, the desire of food, right? It's still a habit I know I can fall into, the food one. Probably because I battled that one a lot longer. Food's been something I've been around my whole life. Pornography was not as prevalent. It was only for teenage years to when I was a young adult, even up to a couple years ago. So that's where it's really key, is like the food was, almost my whole life. So it's a deeper groove that I have to overcome. But you do that rep by rep, resistance by resistance, and repetition by repetition. So just keep going on, keep forming good habits. For me, it was prayer and time with God. Exercise, right? It's just, running every day, or exercising, or at least trying to stay on top of your diet, right? Just try those things day by day. Those are all repetitions. Whatever you think is a positive thing could be a good repetition. Whatever you're trying to break, right? Break the negative repetitions. Break those bad habits. Again, kind of not to be repetitive, but it takes a long time. It took me at least 4 years. It took me at least 4 years that I can think of actually trying. And then since May of last year is really when I felt like I was able to break a lot of those habits and not be held to those same standards. And another thing I really want to note is, don't compare. And this is the problem I would get in a lot, is comparing where my progress was at with others my age, other Christians, other people who exercised. Is I would compare, oh wow, that person looks really in shape, and I get really discouraged. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like, you used to weigh 290 plus pounds. Like, you don't need to be discouraged that you don't have a six pack or bench 200 pounds or whatever. You don't need to be discouraged. You're in a different process. You're on a different road than they are. So something I talked to one of the youth kids about a while ago is, sometimes progress is like building a brick house, right? The more we add reps, the more we add progress. You lay your brick down each day. And the more you improve at something, whatever that task is, you just lay down that brick each day. Now, for example, our example that we used for youth group was running, right? You don't want to compare yourself to somebody who's, a natural runner who's been running for the last 10 years, and you've only been running for 1 year.